Okay, so we're on the home run now. I want to say thanks for everyone who stuck with us. This is it's been an amazing day. The feedback around the coffee has been fantastic. Not about the coffee. I meant outside around the coffee. Yeah, I'm not really making myself very clear, am I? It's the end of a long day. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get some feedback from the 3 questions that we've been debating in the World Café. And I'm going to hand you over to our chairs, who I'm going to ask you to huddle together again so that we can see you nicely together. But I'm going to also ask if we can go backwards, starting with tables 6 and 5, then 4 and 3, and then 2 and 1. That's just because some people have to leave and they're very desperate to give the valuable feedback that they have. Not to worry, because if we don't get to everything, we will be compiling a report, and we'll try and address what we can in that report. But you will have to be very patient with us, because that's obviously going to take time. So I'm going to ask the chairs if they want to go around the room and get the feedback. 10 minutes per question. I can time you, because I'm very good at that. Okay, here we go.
So we're going to hear back from table 6, which was the one key point that resonated.
No, sorry. You want to sit down in front of you?
Sure, thank you. And Judy, do you mind mentioning the question as well? That's okay.
Yes. Okay, I've got it here. Okay, so the question that we are responding to right now, she says, quickly skipping around on notes. Okay, this is the systemic question. We understand that effective allyship on anti-racism requires that we name, interrupt, and uproot systems of inequality and ongoing colonial patterns. How might we achieve this? Starting off with table 6, Areshte.
Thank you very much. We had amazing discussions around this table, and I apologize if I cannot summarize it, all that we discussed. How much time do I have? 2 minutes?
You got 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Thank you. So one of the first things that came up was that, one of the things that came up was that for us, Marcel shared an amazing thing with us, and it has stayed with me, and I feel that I have grown as a person today. She mentioned that these questions are so big that we wouldn't be able to address them, that we will, and if we try to, we will end up in a fetus position because they are so big. We wouldn't be able to resolve these issues, and we need to accept that it may not happen in our lifetime, but that the wisdom comes from sitting a shade tree that we know we will not sit under in our lifetime. So that we need to start asking ourselves where we can find, where we can fit in the solution. The other things that came up and people shared were amazing, that also being able to see what racism is, because a lot of times we can see them. We can't see the racism in symbolism around us. And the example was when, for example, if you go and walk into the Great Hall of Sydney, beautiful place, and as someone who loves art paintings, I look at all those portraits, amazing, but all of them are our previous male vice chancellors and think of the students who are with all those diverse backgrounds, walking in those hallways. What is the message being transferred to them? And also other things, the symbolism around us and how we can understand, identify it, like all these statues around us that we may not be aware of their backgrounds. So that was another factor that was discussed. The other thing was that to also look inside as well. A lot of times we may not be able to see the racism, but the moment we are targeted ourselves, then that's when suddenly we see the pattern. And identifying those factors are probably the first thing as well. And one other thing, I guess, was also how can we discuss racism but do not give power to the term itself? Because when we focus on racism, the opposite term for it is anti-racism, but it's still to strengthen that colonial terminology in a sense. So we would like to think of an opposite term for it, but it seems that we don't have it. And in our discussions to uproot it, we still give some power to those negative terminologies. And I stop here as my time finishes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your excellent summary of some really complex conversations that you've had. Thanks for that, Freshna. And may I invite table 5 to give some feedback. Is this table 5? Yep. Yeah. To give some feedback. You addressed the same question, so it'll be interesting to see what you came up with.
Thanks for offering this opportunity to share our discussion. Our discussion is very interactive and from different country participants. Using a systemic concern and rethink or what kind of intervention might be effective to achieve the goal. Yeah, it's quite complicated and difficult, but some principle has been highlighted in our discussion. Firstly, would be co-design concept, because if you avoid to use co-design, how to protect their cultural safety. Based on this, the community people will be engaged in the cooperation. So the community need should be explored, and also policymakers such as a university or hospital should be co-produce a practical action to help the people in the community, also help the student in learning. The second is the power and the position, because the power should be redistributed or distribution appropriately to make sure the resource can be available, which can facilitate or enhance interprofessional or collective effort to make things happen and also ensure the quality. The third would be education and engagement. For example, if you are a teacher, you teach students in the classroom talking about cultural awareness. If you have never been to the community, how to achieve this? So it's identity for individual, group identity. This will be ensure the cultural humanity could be developed and ensured. So yeah, based on this, the critical point, I think that will be helpful for achieve this goal by systemic thinking. Thank you.
There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you so much. There were some really great points in your responses. Yeah, there's so many things that yeah, I'm a bit overwhelmed this time.
There's quite a lot, isn't there? I was just wondering whether Julia or Joe had something they'd like to say about
I
that.
sat on Nija's table as well for a point. And one point that I remember we reflected on was also looking inwards at our own health professions too.
Yeah.
which is a really part of critical work. So we had some reflections about nursing, about the medical profession. I was reflecting on the dietetics profession and its complicity in weight stigmatization. And so I, you know, started that work in dismantling can also start with the work that we're doing and what vocations we have ourselves. So I thought that was a really robust, interesting discussion too.
Thank you. I'm going to move to the next question, question 2, which is the interactional question. Given that feedback is a gift, how can we glean this feedback whilst not burdening oppressed people?
Thanks, everyone. So Group 4's discussions were international, and they were with Indigenous and non-Indigenous voices as well. So it was very interesting to hear everybody's viewpoint. This is just a selection of them. I don't have the whiteboard open, but we talked about trust and relationships in this space as being very important, and learning from rather than about people. Part of that, a strategy that was given was receiving feedback from patients as a strategy, and that really shows cultural humility. Unfortunately, if there was a problem that required a report to be written, and we looked at that, though, that would be an opportunity to learn from that situation. However, there is an importance that what we've heard today is that we can make mistakes. And so it's really important to move away from that fear-based pressure of making a mistake. We also talked about the importance of sitting and listening. And that opportunity might afford more privileged people to hear and challenge their own thoughts. And there could be an opportunity to guide and lead individuals to their own solutions, which can often be much more meaningful. We also spoke about understanding everyone's skills to build a solutions focus, really, rather than to build on strengths, rather than focusing on deficit. And I think, and just that cultural humility should be implicit as part of what we do. I think that's a summary of, yeah, what we had.
I might just add to that as well, Sue, that we had that really good discussion around, I got my mic on, can you hear me all right? Yes. Around that courage in managing feedback, or and which we inevitably get, you know, several times I've had this, you know, you get pretty strong feedback about what you've done from the community you're working with, whether that be in a hospital environment or a community environment, and how you learn from that and realize that this is about your learning, that the feedback is important, but it's not about every person in this world either can't be liked by everybody, always makes a mistake, learns from that mistake. And that's the critical thing, isn't it? You learn from that mistake and you move forward. But you have to move forward, not doubting yourself and making yourself feel worse, but just realizing that you have learned and you get strength from the fact that you've learned and you can move forward. And that's a really important part of that journey. It's quite a personal journey too. And we all, when somebody, and I've had this, you know, I was explaining, I had a very strong situation like that, very confronted. And it took me a while to get my stability back again. But in having got that back again, I feel stronger and able to cope with the winds of change of people's views and whether I've misstepped or not. And I feel that I, you know, take on, it's actually made me stronger but more humble, if I can say that.
I might just add too, Jo, I remember when we were discussing having this as a question, we were also reflecting on not expecting that we deserve feedback. So if we receive it, you listen to it because that's a gift. that you've been given that opportunity. But if we make our own mistakes, I think there's power differentials in expecting to be told where we went wrong. When we can actually do some of that work ourselves, we can do some of our own reading, we can discuss like we're doing today, we can discuss with one another. And it's that, yeah, that socio-political education that we can do ourselves. There's plenty of resources on the internet. You know, this is not the first time that these conversations are being had. So I think that's a really important point to reiterate as well, is to think about our expectations when responding to feedback or seeking feedback in the first place.
We had similar answers with deep listening and observation, but a couple of other things that came up said, what are you going to do with the information I give you? Will you punish me for it? And do the oppressed really have a choice when giving feedback, is how it can be determined. Also that written communication, if you're doing a survey, can that prejudice the oppressed because their understanding of written surveys or feedback might not be in terms they understand, or they feel demeaned by it. So, and part of that was too, like it said, follow people on social media on their own terms, but also at times when you're asking for feedback, be prepared to pay for it if need be, because we want, yeah, and pay people in real money, not gift cards, was one that came up because they said that needs to make a difference to their life and how well they can use it and how well they'll give you information. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Possum. Some really great points there. Yeah, when we were talking about the available resources and where we go to be self-determined in achieving feedback, we were talking about at the University of Sydney. I stumbled upon just the other day the library special collections, and we have a featured collection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander resources, and there's thousands of resources there that perhaps we didn't know about. So, you know, those sorts of resources enable us to be self-determined in finding things out that we need to know. So I just thought I'd mention that. So we're going to go to table number
2. I think we're just moving question now, so I'll read the question out. Yeah, and actually just exactly what you were saying just there, Marcel, fits with the next question too, which is what steps might we take to turning the gaze inward and be critically reflexive, and how do we feel about that?
Okay, well, there was lots of good discussion, and I'm sorry if I miss anything key. Please jump in if I did. Hopefully coming to today is a start for this particular question for all of us. But I think what really came out was that discussion around understanding who we are and where we might sit on either side of the coin. And in terms of those feelings, recognizing the uncomfortable feelings we may have about that and being able to explore that further, as well as, and I guess it links with that, you know, being vulnerable and being okay to sit in that uncomfortable space, and actually work out why that is. We also had around that, I guess, some feelings of guilt and shame that we discussed about when you do critically reflect, and perhaps not trying to look at it as a bad thing, but recognizing those feelings and then being able to move forward from that. And I think, Julia, you may have said it, but to actually take some action. So it's really important that we understand for ourselves what's going on and where we sit in the context of what we're doing, but how we then might move forward as well, so that we don't just stay in that space. We moved on to big stuff then. We went from individual to, I guess, students, and how in the context of the work we do in teaching university students,
how we fit this critically reflexive practice into the curriculum planning, and how we actually plan for assessment and rubrics, and how do you measure that, because it's very difficult. And we feel like we've created a whole nother day, Lynn. So that will be something for the next time to discuss. I think there's really a lot to unpack with that. But I think, you know, as we said, just from everything we've heard today, hopefully we're all kind of at our first step and we're starting that journey for ourselves.
You or me? I don't care. I've got whiteboard. I did a completely unscientific thematic analysis of the no, I did not. But many of the things that we struggled with the question, because we felt in all three discussions, we felt that it's almost impossible to just individually turn the gaze at yourself without having others and seeking information and perspectives from others. But if you are, then one of the things that has been said often today is that you have to start with who you are, what you have, where you come from, what journeys you've taken, and that you ask yourself the question who you are in relation to the place that you inhabit, your learning history, your current and ongoing connection of the land with the land that you inhabit, and your relation to that history. By that, you recognize the lineages and the archaeologies of the ideas and perspectives that you've been fed, and you have to know them before you can actually critically question them. And those are important because you're not just one person. It is who you are in connection with others that gains meaning, and that in that connection, in that relationship, you can start to critically identify the structures and the powers that form you, that form that relationship, and the way it forms the affordances and the privileges that you have. So that was one theme. Emerging from the data. Sorry, inside joke. I think another point is that you also have to be gentle on yourself. Yeah, I'll finish in 2 minutes. You have to be gentle on yourself. You have to realize that it's a big step to make a commitment to having ongoing conversations, that it is threatening, that it will create cognitive dissonance, that you will find that you're not the nice person always, or the perfect person that you might want to be, but that it requires you, and that you can ask difficult questions about yourself, but you need to frame them in the terms of what do I want to learn? How do I want to grow? How I want to develop as a lifelong learning process? And then it became a bit more practical in terms of always seek opportunities to enable others to do the same. Because if you're just changing yourself, you're just changing yourself. Perhaps the key thing somebody said is to just do it. Start by just doing it, but you can also use reflective frameworks because it's very much associated with reflection, threshold, and unlearning. So, for example, whatever model you use, for example, Gibbs, but it will keep you on track. And one of the things that was very positive in the end is that if we look at the younger generation and the way they have, through technology, the opportunity to be exposed or engaged with so many perspectives all around the world, much more than when I was a young man, very long time ago, that we should leverage those perspectives and ask people to solicit as many perspectives as they can for that critical reflection.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really resonated with both of the feedback about what we can do in being critically reflexive, and then what do we do with it, which is the very important part of critical theory. And for me personally, my doing is this. This is my doing. It's sharing what I've learned, and that's collaboratively with others, particularly with other educators, because then we pass that on to our students. So it's that ripple effect. And that's really what I see as my action and my next steps is, yeah, trying to impart this way of knowing, being and doing for our future health professionals so they can do better. And yeah, we can all, as we've said many times, we can't do this work in isolation. It's a collective effort. And this is the very start. And I'm really excited. I think there's so many interesting ideas, interesting theories, pedagogy that we still need to unpack. And then we raise that on this table. How do we assess this? What are we marking our students on? What's satisfactory? What's not satisfactory? So I think that's, some really interesting conversations to keep having. As we all know, assessment drives learning. So we can have some of this embedded into curriculum, but how are we seeing what changes our students have? And yeah, so I'm excited to continue the conversations.
Yeah, me too. And I really like the feedback about creating and maintaining our relationships with each other. And I think I really feel personally that today I've created, maybe begun so many good working relationships with like-minded people. And I'm really looking forward to continuing those conversations. So I hope there's an opportunity for us all to stay in touch and to report back to each other about how we're going in our work, in our teaching and learning, in our own professional learning journeys. Yeah, and look to our fearless leaders to find some money to get us back together again in the not too distant future, so we can carry on with this really important work. So great.
Thank you for dinner. I don't know what's for dinner. It's only
relationships are important.
Jo, do you want to say something at the end? Would you like to say something, Jo?
Yes. I was actually going to say the same thing. It's a very similar thing anyway, but for this work, relationships and time. And really that's really two critical components of it. And also some of it can, like in theory, when we talk about it today, it can seem very overwhelming. Well, how do you change a system? How do you change the ways in which you work? I like the metaphor for myself anyway of thinking about the small things, the daily things that we do, and it's like a brick in the path forward. If you can create a brick that fits and that you can make as part of the pathway forward, then I think that's a big thing. That's a very big thing. And if you build that on relationships and having quality relationships and time, then that's a contribution. Yeah, it makes change. There is that ripple effect of that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We are now going to move to probably what is, well, I'd say the most important moment of the day, although we could not get to this moment without the other moments in the day. But I'm going to ask everyone who is still here to reflect for 2 minutes and think about what action are you going to take based on the conversations we've had today? How are you going to be critical in taking this forward with a solid action that's doable? Let's give you a time frame. You've got 12 months, shall we say, but you could also think about a further time frame of 3 years. I heard somebody say the other day, we always overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 3 years. So I'm going to ask you to think for a moment, and then I'd like you to commit by putting it in the chat. We won't name names, but what we'll do is as commitments come through, I'll begin to ask our chairs just to talk about a few of those commitments that have come through before we finish up our day. So we're going to take a minute or two to reflect and write something in the chat. Thank you.
It doesn't have to be a big, huge systemic change you're going to create. It could be just, I'm going to read this article, or, you know, anything big or small.
I'm going to share what we learned today with a
A
colleague.
colleague, yeah, I'd love to just,
Doesn't have to be
you can type that.
world groundbreaking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd just, in the spirit of critical theory, we'd love to start, see some of our actions. And
Yeah, I know I put everyone on the spot here, but I do think that this is an important next step. And we already have one in the chat from Ija, I think. They're coming in now, okay.
Do you get to read that?
Yes, I did. Yes.
we may as well start reading them, and as we're reading, more will come through. So we had Ija, a voluntary service learning conducted by medical students in Chang'an University in Taiwan, which can highlight the importance of co-design as a concept. That's wonderful. Amazing. Yeah, we'll go next.
So from Celine D, we should stop calling you Dion. This is not your name, but you are Celine D. Celine said that she will connect with various colleagues she's met today to facilitate potential cross-discipline research, collaboration, involve them in curriculum design and have them teach into units of study I coordinate. So we'll look forward to hearing from these.
Yeah. And do you want to go?
From,
You
oh,
don't need to hold it up.
oh, because it's used to it. Ati? Ati?
Yes.
Ati
Yes,
online,
I'm
sorry.
into-
Oh, there you are, sorry.
Yeah.
Hi, Ati. Working more and more on yourself and your learning with a focus on more listening and feedback and sharing what you have learned with others. The focus on listening and feedback and sharing what you've learned with others. Great, that's really
wonderful.
terrific. Thank you.
Excellent. We've got
Thanks.
here again. So the concept of cultural awareness and cultural humility needs to be integrated into our curriculum design. Woohoo! In different levels of training, through undergraduates to postgraduates across the university and training hospital. Engagement and education will be critical, determining factors for success for training future medical or paramedic students and healthcare professionals. Yay. It's wonderful to hear that international impacts. Ooh, it's got one more.
There's another one. From Gloria. Gloria needs to understand more the systems of inequality I am part of and contributing to through reading relevant material, spending time with people who have done it before, be part of networks like Warren Yarra. Fantastic. Yeah, exactly.
So have Ida Johnson, who suggests initiate conversations about these themes with colleagues and friends, for that conversation, and start the conversations by asking questions and being humble about my own knowledge within this space. Thank you. Thank you, Ida.
Cool. Keep coming. Good. I'm going to do my best, but okay, yes. To keep this in the fore of my consciousness and reflect on how as we connect and conduct critical conversations. Thank you, Warren Yarra, for organising this program.
Oh, thank you. So I think we're probably coming to an end here. If you'd like to continue to put your commitments in the chat, that would be great. I think we're ready to share the final slide, Isabel.
We've got one more.
We've got one more come in.
From Priya to everyone, Priya's commitment position to the word critical in borrowing from its Marxist roots means emancipation. With the privilege of working closely with Aboriginal educators, my ongoing commitment to criticality is in two ways. One, embedded Indigenous ways of knowing and being in all of my academic work-related endeavours, especially scholarly work. And two, being more internally reflexive in my own biases.
Wow.
Very courageous. Priya.
Yeah, so I'm going to start winding up here. I honestly have a lot of thanks to say to everyone online and in the room. So first of all, thank you to everyone who has managed to stay the day, because it's been a long day, but I feel like we've come a long way. I'd like to thank all of the table hosts for their bravery when I said, would you be a table host? And we're going to do it blended, and there's going to be a bit of training, and you know, don't worry, you don't need to be a topic expert. And every single one of our table hosts today said yes without reservation. And I thank you for that, because you did not know what you were doing. You did not know what you were putting yourself into. I'd like to thank our three chairs, Marcel, Julia, and Joe. Awesome women, very strong women. You have developed the program, and now you've helped deliver the program together. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. And yeah,